What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we are going to be working on a 2020 BMW 330i xDrive. Today on the G20 behind me, this is a B48 4-cylinder turbo equipped car. We are going to be covering a complete coolant refresh. We're going to be breaking up this series of videos into 6 videos. 1 going to be the radiator replacement, 2 the heat module, aka your thermostat, 3 your water pump and pulley, 4 is going to be the oil cooler slash oil filter housing, 5 will be your expansion tanks for both the low temp and high temp circuits, and 6 being the serpentine belt and tensioner. For the purpose of today's DIY, we are going to be focusing on the heat module, aka your modern day thermostat. You're seeing this in a lot of newer vehicles. Alex does a good job going in depth into the B48 cooling system diag for this engine, but essentially what this is in a very simple manner is a set of plastic valves that help control and divert the coolant flow within the engine, making it more efficient as far as warm up, also affecting your MPGs and all that good stuff. So while a definitely advanced thermostat, something that is essentially made out of plastic, it's gonna fail whether it starts to leak externally or internally, and it also has electronics built in. So as you know, water and electronics can only last so long. So far we are seeing these make it up to like the 100,000 mile range. This car behind us having almost 80, but it's something we're gonna replace as preventative maintenance throughout this whole cooling system repair. And something to note, the heat module and the oil cooler are gonna be pretty much hand in hand with the work required. So if you're looking for both of those DIYs, you may see some similarities. That's just that they're gonna take about the same amount of work. And to get to that work, let's take a look at some of the tools we're gonna need for this job. All right, for this DIY, we have a large pry bar here, which is going to be a bit overkill, along with a larger flathead screwdriver and a bunch of pick tools. Those are going to come in handy for removing not only the electrical connectors that we're going to be working with, but some of the coolant lines as well. They get really stuck on there over time. So whatever we can use to get a little bit of leverage is going to go a long way. We have a couple different ratchets. We have both a 1/2 inch drive, 3/8 drive, and 1/4 inch drive. For our torque wrench, it's going to be a 3/8 drive today. Flex head is a key must have for the DIY that we're going to be doing, since we're going to be in some tight spaces. For those ratchets, we also have different extensions and adapters. We have a couple sets of pliers here. Some are going to be for expanding rivets. Some are going to be for our hose clamps. We have some that I use specifically for some of the evap lines, mainly because I'm down a hand, but you could probably get away without that. And then we just have a different type of trim removal tool for whatever plastic rivets we may encounter. As far as sockets go, having something that can go all the way from an 8 mil to an 18 mil, of course not counting the 27 for the oil filter cap, is going to be key. As far as specialty sockets go, we are going to be using an E8 and an E10 socket. These are these inverted Torx, which is what the housings are held on by. We have a T30, both a long and short one, as well as a T20. For the crank, we have our Hazard specialty socket. This is going to help us rotate the crank when it comes time to priming oil system of the engine. Unlike the older models, you can undo injectors and then turn them over a bit until you build oil pressure. With this, we have to do it manually. So this tool is going to come in handy there. Of course, it will also be linked in the video description below. We have a couple plugs, a paint pen. This is our UVU vacuum fill tool, which is going to be a critical step in filling the cooling system on this car, both the low temp and high temp circuit. It's the only way to really do it. And then we'll pair that with a bleeding procedure that we're going to be doing with the car. We have some electric ratchets, an electric impact, some dielectric grease, which is going to be the magic coating for all our O-rings that we're going to be working with today, and some painter's tape that we're going to use as a blocker. Not pictured here, but needed, of course, is going to be shop towels, a flashlight, and something to catch all your coolant in. But like anything else, especially with a more involved DIY like this, and something that's going to have a lot of overlap with some of the other bits you saw from the beginning of the intro, be sure to watch all the way through. Sometimes we may sub out a tool, we may add a tool, or we may just be completely missing a tool, and we won't know until we get through it. So do your homework, watch it all the way through. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. To get started on this series of cooling system overhaul, replacement, whatever you want to call it, Our first step for all of these is going to be to disconnect the battery. We're going to undo the negative terminal first, 10 mil socket. All right, we'll tuck that baby down, and just as insurance, we'll do the positive terminal as well and let it sit to the side. If you want to be extra safe, you can put some towel or something in between these so they don't make contact. And then just so we don't forget, we are going to either put a towel or just put the trunk liner back in, sticking out so that no one closes this trunk, making it harder to get to the battery when we're done. All right, continuing on from battery removal, again, we're going to be joining both circuits, whether you're just doing the expansion tanks or you're doing the oil filter housing or the water pump, whatever it may be. We're still going to cover how to drain the entire system, since we're going to have to fill either one or both at some point, depending on which video you are watching. But next on our list of things is going to be to remove the caps to the expansion tanks. Obviously, this should go without saying, but you're only wanting to do this on a nice cold system. This car's been sitting in the garage overnight and prepped for today, so it's nice and cold. Last thing you want to do is burn yourself or damage the car. All right, with these two caps off and out of our way, something that can come off now is also our beauty cover. This just lifts up and you can set it to the side. All right, at this point, we are getting a bit closer to draining the high temp and the low temp circuit. In order to get the high temp circuit drained, you can go about it two ways, but both are going to require the removal of the air intake. One is going to be to undo the auxiliary pump, which we will be doing, also removing one of the lines coming off of the water pump itself. And that's going to drain most of that side of things. The other thing would be, again, to remove this whole air intake box and silencer, then remove the fan, and you can get to the lower radiator hose, of course, once you remove the skid plate underneath. So you can tackle it either way you like. I will show you both. Before I get it into the actual draining, though, we are going to remove this air silencer / air box intake system here so that it's out of our way for all of the following videos that we're working on. All right, we're just going to work our way around our air box here. We have an electrical connector here that we're going to undo. With these, you want to free up the little gray tab, just unlock it. Little flathead screwdriver, nice and gently works. Then you can press on the tab and pull back. If you need to, you can use the flathead to pry and release that. You'll see there's a little alligator clip here. We're just going to pop that off of the intake here using a little flathead. These can be a little bit stubborn if they've never been off before. I have to switch over to a pick tool. But this is going to be a common theme throughout this DIY. There might be wondering, what DIY? All of them. And then for now, we'll just pull it back and tuck it somewhere over the valve cover. From here, we have another alligator clip that rides onto the top of our silencer. We just need to free that one off of the, we'll call it the air box assembly. All right, that can stay loose for now. If you can see right next to that, we have another little gray connector here. We're going to release that baby up. Following this line, we're going to go to this PCB line right here. We have two ridge sides to this connection that goes on top of our valve cover. We're going to pinch on both sides and then lift the line off. There we go. I just use these pliers. My right hand is out of commission, so I'm a little limited to what I can do with my left hand, but squeezing these two tabs helps release that. As we pull out this whole thing, I think what we're going to do here is disconnect our plug on top of our turbo here. And that's just going to help free up this harness so that we don't have to really worry too much about bending things around to clear that as we pull out the air box. So this will give us a little bit more working room. Again, just a little gray lock there. Once it's out, press down, pull that baby back, and this can swing up here as well. That'll be out of our way. Still have another PCB line to undo. You're going to see the one up top here. There's another connector actually at the bottom. That's what's going into our intake. So we're going to release it from down here. Squeeze both sides, same thing, and then try to pull up and release. And they come from the passenger side. To give us a little bit more room to see exactly what we're breaking here, we're going to undo this flathead clamp and just separate the air box from the rest of the intake. It's going to make our lives a little bit easier. Thread this baby back together, and we'll throw that back on our air box once we pull it out. These are just held in by rubber grommets. You can pull it out as a whole and then set this to the side. Now with that off, we can see a little bit better what we have going on. Here's that vacuum line down here at the bottom. These clips are toast just from touching them. So what we're going to do is we're going to release the feed from the turbo. You can see just a little bit on the top, part of that quick disconnect clamp similar to the coolant lines. You can also see it underneath the diverter valve. Take a peek from underneath. So now we're going to release the clip going to our turbo from the inlet, and that way we can try to pull this whole assembly towards us a little bit and get that last PCV line out. It's okay if this flings off, just don't forget to reattach it after the fact. Now we should be able to pull this back. If it's still hung up, then more than likely your clip is still doing something, in which case you can continue to remove it or pull it off the rest of the way. I'm going to reach in there for 1 sec. Now we're going to squeeze these two together again, do our best to try to get this line off. Although these tabs are cooked from living so close to the turbo, we might have to replace them, in which case we will drop that in the video description below. Right, and with that, we can pull this assembly out, giving us way more room to not only the fan and the coolant lines going to the radiator. Once we get this charge pipe out of the way, though, we'll have room to our water pump, our serpentine belt, all that good stuff over here on this area. So let me set this to the side and we'll go on from there. So on the quest to drain our high temp circuit, we have our charge pipe here, which you can see now clearly goes down here. So we're going to undo that clip similar to the one we just did at the turbo inlet. We have 2 electrical connectors. Then we have a couple Torx holding this on to the throttle body. So let's start with the electrical connectors. We'll disconnect those first, and then we'll move on to the Torx, then the clip at the bottom, and we'll pull this baby out of our way. We have 3 T30s. I'm going to start blasting these off. Here's our bottom one closer to the alternator, the extended T30. Pull back, gentle pull back, and look at all the room that gives us. I'm going to set this baby to the side, and then we'll go from there. All right, at this point, we are almost ready to start draining the side of the high temp circuit, again, via BMW's instructions by the auxiliary pump here and our main water pump. Before we do that, though, the reality is most of the coolant is just going to drip down the front of the block, over our steering rack, subframe, all that good stuff, which is fine. We can clean that up. There is no drain petcock on this system that you can just go from underneath and release, unfortunately. That's something that they kind of have done away with on these models. So what we're going to do before we do anything else is remove the lower skid plate so that our coolant can go straight through to our catch pan. We will also remove the lower driver's side, if you will, like belly pan, part of the fender liner. That's going to give us access to the coolant line for the low temp circuit. Let's get underneath. Too much talking. Skid plates. Maybe we'll just rip the low temp circuit while we're down there, and then we'll go from there. All right, to get us started, we have 10 8mm for the center shield. Then we'll move on to the one on the driver's side. Removing that one actually gave us access to our low temp circuit line, which is excellent. So you don't really have to worry too much about this side. But we still do need to get this plate off, which is why we removed this front one to expose our hardware. So with that, let's blast this baby out of here. All right, we have 9 18mm bolts holding in this bottom shield. Let's zap these babies out. All right, with that panel removed, now that's going to open up all the area here for our coolant to kind of trickle its way through. Before we get back down on the ground, though, let's take advantage of being up here with the hose here for our low low temp circuit now, and we'll go ahead and pop that out. We'll drain it. Once it's done draining, we'll plug it back in, and then we don't have to worry about it. Again, if you want a little bit more room to work with, there is 3 more 8 mils here at the front, and you have another 3 here on the inside of the fender liner holding on this cheek. But I think we should be fine. Our clip is right here. So let's get our catch pan. Again, lid is off of the expansion tank up top. Let's get that baby drained. First, we're gonna release the clip to our coolant line. I'm just using a small pick to get in here since it's a little tiny spot. Small flathead would work too. All right. And then this is the part where we take a shower. So we're gonna position our catch pan as best as we can and then work this line off. There we go. Man, that took a whole 25-inch pry bar to free up that hose. That's how stuck these O-rings can get. All right, we're gonna let that do its thing. We'll let it drip, and then we'll come back and plug it back up. With our low temp system drained, we're gonna pop our hose back on, then I'll throw the clip back on, but that will be good for the low coolant or low temp system. So we'll throw a clip back on there, and then we'll be good to rock and roll. All right, with that part of the system drained, now we're gonna head back up into the engine bay. We'll get a lower catch pan for our coolant for the high temp circuit underneath the car, and we'll go from there. All right, next on the list is gonna be removing our auxiliary pump. For those of you just doing the serpentine belt DIY, you can simply undo the clamp and just swing the pump out of your way. But for everything else, we are draining the cooling system. So again, we're gonna continue on with the high temp circuit now, starting at the auxiliary pump. So we're gonna move that out of our way in full. So if you're just doing the belt and tensioner, you can just unplug the electrical connector and then swing the pump out of the way. We have our catch pan situated down below. Now we're gonna get our coolant line here. I'm just gonna pop this baby up. Same as the other lines we've been doing. So you'll see this magenta coolant coming out of our system. This indicates that your car more than likely has been at a dealer for a repair. And between BMW switching from the blue coolant to the green coolant, at one point the dealers were having to use this magenta pink stuff. And that was like a good way for them to keep track of, what's been through the dealer network for a repair versus not. So more than likely this was in for something, whether it was warranty work or post-warranty work. This car has had a rough previous life. So that's just something to note. We're gonna be filling this up with green, but totally compatible, just something funky in the old BMW world. While that's still draining, we're gonna do the other line here. All right, we're gonna let this drain for a little bit and then we'll come back up to removing the rest of the auxiliary pump. Next, we'll undo our little electrical connector. We have a 10 mil down below holding the clamp together for this auxiliary pump. And then that pump can come out. We'll leave the bracket with the pump, and I'm gonna throw the 10 mil nut bracket here so that we don't have to guess where that goes later. And then we'll probably fight with it later when we're dealing with this hose. All right, moving on, you can see on this little damper cover, this little resonator cover that we have on the front of the engine block, we have a couple more alligator clips here. We're gonna release these so that when we pull this cover off, this harness can kind of do its own thing. So there's one. We have one more here. I'm just gonna open up this baby here. The other thing we can probably do is just pull the rivet out of the cover here, but sometimes that can rip too, depending on how old the stuff is. Let's see if we can, no, that one's putting up a little bit of a fight. So I'm just trying to split this clamp open here. Just easier said than done. There we go. All right. Wonderful. We have one more alligator clip that goes to the lower auxiliary pump here, and down below You can see the connector for it. I don't really think this will be in our way, but just for sake of filming and giving you the best view, we're going to go ahead and undo it. So let me separate the alligator clip off the auxiliary pump first. And then if we follow that down, we'll see our electrical connector down below. I'm going to unlock that gray tab as carefully as I can. Now with that, we have a couple expanding rivets to remove to get this little cover off. So let's work on that next. I'm going to use a little flathead screwdriver to try to pop these babies open. You can use rivet removal pliers, which we have, but I mean, again, you don't have to add more tools than already needed to this list. Let's just keep it nice and simple here, shall we? We have a third one hiding behind the auxiliary pump that we just did the electrical connector from. It's going to be a little bit sneaky to record, but it is there. In the sky. We'll get that one after. We have one more here on the bottom corner. That's going to be right down there on the bottom left. All right. Here's a better view of that cover. We had rivet 1, rivet 2, 3 behind the auxiliary pump, and 4. We're going to clean this up, set it to the side, but now we have a way better view. And before we get too carried away here with the high temp draining, you can take a look actually. And right behind that coolant hose, you'll see a lot of dried pink stuff here. So either it had a leak at one point, or it's just starting to leak enough where it's only starting to get a little bit coated here. I don't know, we'll have to see once we get this hose out. But next, to continue with the high temp draining, high temp circuit is going to be this clamp here. So let's get ready for that. Now to finally drain the high temp circuit, we're going to undo what is essentially the lower radiator hose. We're going to pull that clip out and then see what our luck is at pulling this hose off. Now we have the charge pipe out of the way. We have obviously the charge pipe out, we have the acoustic cover out, we have our auxiliary pump out completely because we are doing cooling system work on this car. Otherwise, just undoing the 10 mil on the clamp and pulling the pump out of the way with the 2 lines connected still is going to be just fine. You don't have to drain the coolant for this. Next, we're going to do a couple of things. First, we're going to remove the throttle body out of our way so we have a bit more room to the alternator hardware. And then we'll show you how to lock the tensioner in a serviceable position. So if you're just looking to do the belts or the whole thing, we'll show you how to lock that out first and then go from there. So we have an E-Torx up top here for the support bracket going to the throttle body, and then 3 10mm bolts. We also have an electrical connector, which we'll tackle after we detach it from the intake manifold. So let's get that E-Torx off, the 3 10mm, and go from there. Next, we're going to free up this coolant line and this harness for our throttle body from this bracket, which we will be removing in just a moment. These are just like an alligator style clamp here. You can just go in with a little flathead and release it. You can also just pop the whole thing off of the metal bracket, but the rivet might be a one-time use situation depending on the age of your vehicle. We also have another clamp here for the cable that goes to the throttle body connector. That just opens up. And just be mindful that this one fed through the bracket assembly when you go to put everything back together. I'm just going to tuck it up and out of the way for now. All right, we have a couple E-Torx here on the cylinder head to remove so we can get this bracket out of our way. We have 2 E8s, so let's get these out. We have one more line here that's being secured by another clip, part of the harness. Let's get that off too. They're a little buried, so it's okay if you miss them. You'll notice them as soon as you try to remove everything. I'm just opening up this clamp from the back side. This is what this clamp looks like right here. It's just a bigger version of this. Here's that clamp from the other side, similar to that smaller one. We'll set this to the side with the 2 E8s we pulled out. So just as a recap, we have our low temp and high temp circuit drained. We still have that lower radiator hose out from the Rad DIY. That's okay, we'll put that one back in at the end. Throttle body is out, along with the supporting bracket. From there, we have a few more things to do up top before we kind of focus all our energy over the intake manifold. We have a hood seal to remove to get out of our way. These are just channeled. Oftentimes, depending on if your car has been apart or not, you'll see this cable here running through the seal. Just lift it out of the seal. Ours is half in its home and half not. Not a big deal, we'll fix it when we install everything back later. Just like that. And we can set this seal to the side. From there, we're gonna move over to the left side of the cowl. Our car is equipped with a auxiliary battery, which we're gonna kill at least the negative terminal on, so let's do that next. We have a lock and unlock tab here. We're just gonna twist that to unlock it. Lift it forward. Just be mindful there's a windshield washer line that runs above here. Just pop that up and out of the channel so you don't take it with you by accident. We'll set this cover to the side, and then we'll tackle the negative terminal on the battery. We have a 13 mil nut that we are going to undo up top here, and that's going to release our negative terminal. All right, and then we can tuck this baby down underneath so it doesn't make contact again. That's going to secure that both the high and low voltage circuits are undone, starting with the battery in the trunk that we did originally. All right, we have a few more bits to undo, so let's get to it. All right, first, after getting the seal out and the negative disconnected, on some cars, you'll see this little bit of paneling back here. It's kind of like a little cover. This one's in worse wear than most. This usually lives up here like so. And it helps just kind of protect everything. So this should be something like this. If yours is missing or falling back, then you're a step ahead because we're just going to move it back to get it out of our way. Again, we see a couple things in here that indicate someone's done some work in here in the past, so that's probably why that's back there like so. All right, next on our larger laundry list of things to do before we start clearing off everything on top of the manifold itself is the DME and PDM over here on the driver's side. We're going to get this whole assembly out. There's going to be a lot of plugs, so let's get to it. We have a cover here to remove. It just slips off, kind of like your beauty cover. And we'll set this to the side, but that is going to expose all the connectors going to our ECU or DME, whatever you want to call it. So let me set this over and then we'll get those undone. So we're going to show you in detail how these are held in with the first one, and then I'm just going to repeat the rest through the other 5 connectors. We have a total of 6. And these are cam locked. We have a little release tab here up front that you're just going to push in and then pull the release towards you. And that's going to release the plug, and then you can lift it up. So we're going to repeat that process across all 6. And then as we move forward, you'll see that these cables are held in with more of these alligator style clips and all that. We'll be prying all of these off before we're done here. So you can either tackle those now as you go along and find them and release them, or do them after the fact, whatever works best for you. So I'm going to do that one and this one here, and that'll get us just more room to show you exactly what we're doing, as well as just help us stay ahead of the game a little bit. All right, with the ECU completely unplugged, I'm going to have you come in a little bit closer. But we have 2 little release tabs towards the driver's side. We're going to pull both of those back and then slide this whole module out. So just one more thing I'm noticing while we're taking this car apart. Someone has been in here. You can see there's some fabric wrapped around. This one has the number 1 Sharpied on it. This one doesn't have a number. This one has a gray fabric. So someone probably marked them, took photos of them, and then took it off. Same thing with the PDM wiring. We have some pink, we have some yellow, we have some blue, and some gray. So again, someone's torn into here before. Couldn't tell you for what, but if you want to label stuff before you take it apart, you can, or take an image. But with the way these wires lay in here and live, they're going to rest back into the same plugs that they came out of. So nothing to really worry about there. All right, we're going to continue with the DME removal. Get some of this wiring out of our way here. And we have this tab here to release. I'm gonna push off of the DME and see if I can lift it a little bit, get it started. All right, this harness is a little bit in our way. What I'm going to do is unplug this electrical connector right here. If you've ever done fuel injectors on these modern BMWs, they have a little tab that just releases them on the inside, and then you pull up. That's going to release that plug. And then we also have one here going to the PDM. That's this one right here that's holding this up. We can release that one now as well, since all of this has to come out no matter what. Okay. It's going to give us a lot more room to work with in the meantime and see what we're doing. So again, I'm just pulling back on these tabs and trying to work the DME up at the same time. But since there's two of them, it can be a little bit tricky. But once you get it going, then just gently lift it up and set it somewhere safely and gently to the side. We're just going to continue disconnecting the plugs going to the PDM once more. And then from there, we will just work our way on getting this harness kind of out of our way so that we can get this whole bracket removed. There we go. Little stubborn bugger. Undo this alligator clip back here now. Give me a little bit more leeway on what I need to do. The power cable has a little red release lock. We're gonna have to unlock that and then we can release that connector. This one might be a little bit tricky because it's facing away from us, so we can't really see what's going on. But let's try to unlock it first. There we go. Right angle pick, and we push back and pull up. Here's another one on an alligator clip that needs to come off. And one thing, again, this could have changed if someone's been in your car before. This power cable is currently under the fuel line, so we're gonna keep it, we're gonna pull it up and out of our way for now, but when we assemble everything later, we'll make sure to put it back underneath these two fuel lines. All right, we're gonna work on this connector over here next. We're gonna separate it from this housing and then we'll unplug it and get it out of our way. So let's do that now. With that last plug undone, we're gonna pull out the PDM module as well. Similar to the ECU, it has a release tab on the front side over here that you just push away with your flathead screwdriver. And on the opposite side in the back, it has one here towards the driver's side strut. Pretty straightforward. Once you push those tabs back, it'll release. So we'll do this one, lift it up, and we'll do the forward one and continue lifting it up. There we go. Pretty straightforward, pretty tiny guy. Again, we're gonna set this gently with the ECU somewhere safe. And then we're gonna move on to this plug here, which should be one of the last plugs in the way of holding in this housing or this electronics bucket, whatever you'd like to call it. First, we're going to release this electrical connector. It has two release tabs, but you can't get to the bottom one with it being mounted on this bracket, and it has to be removed anyway. So with our pick, we have a couple little tabs here to release to help get this plug out of this housing. These can be a little bit sticky or jammed up or even broken if someone's been in here before already, which doesn't help. There we go. So you can see a better look. This is what we were pushing on, these little releases. So one from the bottom goes up and then the two from the top go down. Now we can unplug this. Beautiful. That can get tucked away over here with our first ECU wiring. We have one more bit of harness to release from this. Well, we have two. We have one on the back here and one on the front. Let's release the front one first so that we can get this harness out of the way, and then we'll do the one in the back. Two 10 mil bolts and this should come out. This forward one, we're just kind of going to pull it towards us a little bit as we lift up, and that should free it up. Pretty uneventful. For the rearward one, similar to what you've seen on the intake manifold, can you see this little release tab? We're going to pull that forward and then lift up, and that'll release that bunch right there. There we go. And now that whole bundle is free. All right, let's get our 10 mil socket and zap out these 2 bolts, and then this whole bracket should come out of our way. 2 10mm bolts, one up here by the fuel lines. All right, I'm gonna set this to the side, and then we're gonna continue on with removing this whole spaghetti of wiring and coolant lines and PCB lines, evap lines, whatever you wanna call them. We're gonna pull this bracket out of the manifold that helps retain the 3 coolant lines here. We have our expansion tank line. We're just gonna pull forward ever so gently. Upper radiator hose, cooler line. Pull down the tab, just like we did on that other bracket, and slide forward. We're gonna set this sucker to the side. That way we can manipulate these lines a little bit more and move them around as we need to. Let me set this over and then we'll move on from there. All right, so we're gonna work on the evap lines next from the fuel tank vent valve or vent line. So first we have this one, which is already undone. This was going to the to the inlet by the turbo. However, you will notice deep down there in front of the turbo, is a kind of like a 2-line setup. So we're gonna separate that from that bottom one so we don't have to pull that vacuum line with us or risk damaging it. So we're gonna pinch this, separate those 2, and then work our way up. These lines get so brittle with heat, especially being right by the turbo, that sometimes these clips just, the second you squeeze them, they like to break, so they don't really do their job. They'll do their job as far as holding everything in place, which is what you want ideally. But they just won't make it easier to release them when you want to remove them, which is the challenging part right now. That's broken. We will be replacing that. And there will be a part number in the description below for you, because if I'm breaking it on a 4-year-old car, you are probably going to break it as well. So we're going to just commit here to the destruction of property and just disconnect this in full. All right. This is going to hang out there. That's free. Following this line up, it's going to connect to our vent valve and our manifold. So let's do those sides now. So following up the line, we have a pressure sensor here, which we are going to undo. Little gray locking tab, pretty standard, you know the drill. Let's separate that open and disconnect it. This one's a little crunchy. Just working it back and forth. There we go. That can hang out there. We're gonna leave these 2 lines connected here, and we're gonna separate them at the vent valve and the intake manifold instead, so that they can come out technically as one, and then we'll deal with replacing this later off the table. Up at the vent valve, same thing, 2 things we're gonna squeeze and release to try to get this off. And this line is clipped on top of this 4-way harness here, but it just popped out from moving it about. There we go there. And then the other half of this line is mating here to the front of the intake manifold. So we'll release that from there too. This one's going to be a little bit harder with the other half of the squeeze being at the bottom. Thank you, BMW. Okay. We'll take this baby and set it to the side. The next line going to our vent valve is attached here with a clip on top of the manifold. And it has a T20 securing it near the throttle body location, which we're going to remove. And then we'll pop that baby out of its home. I'm just going to use a little flathead screwdriver. I'll pry it up, just like that. I'm going to put the T20 back on the intake manifold so I don't have to keep track of one single little bolt. To help with the removal of this vent valve, we're going to free up this harness that runs over the top of the manifold. These 2 wires are part of this whole spaghetti. We're going to release just this this little bunch here. These slide into this bracket that slid into our PDM and DME holder. You can see the release tabs on the back. I'm just going to push them in towards the front and lift up on this. And here they are. These little guys right here. And then following that, we have 2 release tabs on top of the manifold. Just push those out towards the driver's side. And bam, we just got so much more room to work with and just a whole One less thing that's going to be in our way truly of working here. These guys can just hang out back here for now. If you want to lift them up and maybe gaff tape them to the side, whatever is best for you. For me, at the moment, we're just going to keep them down out of our way. All right, following the vent line here, we have an electrical connector first. Let's do that first. I'm just going to use a little pick to lift up the tab on the opposite side and help slide that off. Beautiful. This line is just clipped into the top of the manifold here, just with a little rubber grommet, which is going to stay behind. And then instead of separating this here, we're going to just pop this out as a whole from the back of the intake manifold. You'll see the little U-shaped bracket there that holds it in place right here. And we're just going to pop that out of there. And then we can just swing that baby over. It's going to pivot here on this plug here. If you want to work on getting this off, you can, but it's not going to be in our way of anything. So we're just going to let that live there, and that'll be just fine. Alrighty. This we're going to pull out of our way. We're going to undo this electrical connector here while we have you as well. We are going to release this gray locking tab. You know the drill. Lift up the locking tab there and pull this connector back. All right, that baby is now out of our way. We're starting to look better. We have another alligator clip here for this harness that we're just going to pop off the top of the manifold. Okay. All right, we're making progress, my good people. We have this bunch of harness here too that we're going to release from the top here. You'll see one release tab right here and one right here. Pretty straightforward. All right, let's swing this over a bit. Once we undo this coolant line, if we'd like, we can feed it out from this harness. You can see currently right now it's being routed in between these two. Again, I couldn't tell you if this is how they were from the factory or not, just because this car's been apart before. Let me know in the comments if this is how yours is. It might be, as far as like putting it back together, I think we'll keep it this way, because from doing other jobs, having a little bit of play in this coolant line has gone a long way. So for now, we are going to just swing it over. And now, since we have our low temp and high temp and all the coolant that we want drained, we can actually work on removing this coolant line next. So let's get ready for that. We'll get our pliers and free that baby up. We have some paper towel to catch any coolant underneath the hose here. We have our pliers for these constant pressure clamps that I so dearly love. We're just going to slide that hose back and then pull this coolant line off. Okay, I managed to clamp the paper towel in there as well. No problem. We'll tuck this line out of our way for the time being. I'll even keep it in with the harness. Just get it out of our way. Whatever you do not want to release the T30s on top of here. You want to leave this intact with the manifold at all times, or you're going to cause damage to the built-in intercooler that's in here. I'm going to see if I have a little plug that I can throw in that as we move it. When we do go to pull it out, there's still going to be some coolant in it. So just to prevent making a bigger mess than we already have, let's see, that'll be perfect. Just a little rubber stopper from that online website we won't speak of. Okay, with that, now we are pretty much ready to start pulling the manifold off. What I'm going to do here as a little preventative is block off any of the sensitive openings that could lead to letting stuff into the engine. Take some compressed air and just blow all the crevices around the cylinder head and the mating surfaces for the manifold, so that when we do pull this off, hopefully nothing falls into the engine. You can do this at the very beginning if you'd like as well, before you start disconnecting everything. However, there's really nothing much here that's going to get affected by what we're doing right now. And we have all the wiring and harnesses out of our way, so we have a real clear view of where to spray air. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then we'll go from there. All right, we are almost ready to pull the manifold off. We have two more things to do before we pull the manifold. One of them can happen after, but we're going to take care of it now versus later. that's going to be draining the engine oil. We're going to open up the oil fill cap to allow the system to breathe, break the vacuum seal. We're going to remove the oil filter cap and filter, or at least crack it open to let that breathe as well. And then we'll hop underneath and remove our drain plug. Let it drain. Once it's fully done draining, we'll button everything back up and then come up top and go from there. So very close. Let's do that now. Oil fill cap. That baby is good to rock. Next, I'm going to grab my socket, and then we'll probably just remove the filter and cap next. So let's do that now. 27 mil socket so that we can get our oil filter cap off. Not a horrible idea to wrap some shop towel around the housing. You're going to get oil everywhere regardless, but the more you can catch, especially if you're just doing a routine oil change, the better. That way it will help if you're one day you're like, do I actually have a leak, or am I just making a mess here? Again, 27 mil, it's a 1/2 inch socket, but I have adapted it down to a 3/8 drive. Free this baby up. All right, we should be able to get it by hand the rest of the way. I'm gonna grab some more shop towel so I can catch the filter as we pull it up and not make a huge mess. All right, now we have our oil filter removed, vacuum seals are broken, everything's open. Let's get underneath the car and drain the rest of the oil. We'll let that do its thing, button everything up, and then we'll come back up top, get that coolant line off, and pull the manifold out. We have a 17 mil drain plug here. Usually there's a little beauty cover that you twist and remove. This one is missing it, making it a little bit more easier access. But we're gonna break that 17 free. Catch pan is ready to rock underneath. And then we will drain the oil and then let it drain as long as it needs to. The more you get out here, the less you'll have to deal with when the oil filter housing comes off. Make sure that old drain plug comes with the crush washer as well. All right, we've let this baby drain for quite a bit. It's coming down to a very small drip, and we're gonna throw in our drain plug with our new crush washer. That crush washer, again, is included with the oil filter, as well as a new O-ring for the cap. However, since we're doing the new housing, or if you're doing the new housing, then you'll have a new cap with a new O-ring on it. I like to clean up the oil before I smush this sealed. Again, 17 mil socket. We're just gonna snug this up today, but 25 Newton meters if you're going to hit it with a torque wrench, not a whole lot. Just letting the calibrated wrist take the wheel for this one. And then if you have it, throw your beauty cover back on, and all is good with the world. All right, we are gonna go back in the engine bay. We have a coolant line to take care of, and then that manifold should come out. For this upper coolant line that goes into our manifold, BMW was kind enough to leave the clip on the front side. So a right angled pick or a tiny flathead screwdriver are gonna be your friend to releasing that. Very standard, very similar to all the other coolant lines that we've taken apart already. Trying to get underneath the clip here, pop that baby open, and then take a shot at pulling it off here. It's gonna keep giving it wiggles to hopefully break that seal between the O-ring and the plastic without breaking the manifold. That's not what we wanna do here. My goal here was that a little bit of brake clean would seep in and act as a lubricant and help release that, which it did. All right, let's tackle some hardware now. Let's start with this already pre-loosened up e-Torx. We have an E10 here to remove. Let's get that baby out. All right, and now we're gonna move over to the hex bolts holding the manifold up top. We have 5 10 mil bolts up top to zap out. We have a long 6-inch extension. All right, being mindful that there's still gonna be coolant in this system. So doing your best to avoid dousing everything is gonna be the move. I wonder if I'm gonna put a plug on that lower one too, where that hose came off. And now let's try to pull this baby out. Bam, baby, no problem. I'm gonna drain the coolant out of this, pull the plugs out, and then we'll set it to the side and we'll move on from there. All right, we have a couple things to undo here. We have some coolant lines and we have a lot of electrical connectors. We're gonna start our way up and work down. As far as coolant lines go, this expansion tank line that runs to our high temp circuit tank, you can see here by the cylinder head, The plastic is starting to turn brown. So if you've seen some of our other cooling system refresh videos, especially the water pump video, this plastic more than likely is going to fall apart the second I take it off. So it's one of those things where we suggest you replace while you are in here doing this kind of work. This will also be linked in the video description below. So we are going to be popping that off on both sides, tank side and then the cylinder head side, and be replacing it by the time we put everything back together. All right, we have our upper radiator hose, which we are going to be disconnecting. We still have this one disconnected from when we did our radiator, and we are going to throw a fresh hose on there as well. Again, these O-rings like to get flat over time, so this one's still fully disconnected. On the radiator side of things, we're going to keep it like that and just replace it in full. Right over here by the acorn, we have another coolant line to undo. Let's get rid of that so it doesn't fall into anywhere delicate. I'm going to use my right angle pick to get under here, pull that line off, and then work that off the heat module here. Maybe a little bit of coercing. Spritz this with some brake clean, see if we can get that in there to act as a lubricant. Oh, that is nice. Nice, Mike. I'm going to take this hose and just kind of fold it over. See if we can kind of get it to just hang out over here by the alternator. All right, with that hose undone, we do have one more coolant line, which is right here at the front of the oil filter housing. That's going to have a clip. Same thing, we're going to release that and just let that line hang out. That pipe that it's connected to comes off of the heat module, which is another thing we're going to be replacing for that specific job. All right, let's get that clip. This is one of those things too where I feel it's probably going to fall apart the second we touch it. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, that is free. That can hang out there, no problem. All right. With most of our coolant lines taken care of for now, let's go ahead and undo the spaghetti web of wiring. We have AC compressor switch, negative to the alternator, positive to the alternator. We have a pressure sensor behind the AC and alternator. There's a plug there that has to come. 2 knock sensors, another temp switch on the block, and then we have one more switch behind the first temp sensor. I'm going to assume that's another, it might be I don't know. It's a sensor. It's coming undone. All of those have to be undone. We have an alligator clip in the front of the oil filter housing, another one for the positive cable right above the oil cooler on the oil filter housing. So we're going to free all those up, swing them out of our way. And if you haven't noticed already, we have the intake manifold ports blocked off with some shop towels so nothing falls in there while we're doing that. Once we have all that wiring out of the way, we're going to tackle the oil filter housing first. There might be a moment where we hop underneath and remove some more shielding to access some of the hardware on the other side. So it's going to be impossible to get it from up top here. So let's do that now. We're going to start with the switch to the AC compressor. We'll follow that back and undo the alligator clip at the oil filter housing. Little gray locking tab. Again, this is going to be pretty repetitive on most of these connectors. You can see I have some paint marks on some of these sensors. Those will just help kind of keep us organized. However, they're really only going to go one way because of the length of them. So like this would not be living somewhere up there. But it's just a good practice to follow. Just a good thing to practice if you do this a lot. And an easy way to stay organized that costs nothing. That can go there. Now we need a 13 mil for our positive. And we can throw that 13 mil nut back on there so that stays with that. And then following that positive cable, you can see there was an alligator clip that lived down there. It literally just came off with the wire. So again, this has been apart before. No surprise there, but one less thing for us to have to tackle. Okay, now let's move behind the alternator. We have another switch back here to disconnect. I'm going to use the pick to release the locking tab. We have a knock sensor Up here to disconnect these, you just push the metal clip in and then pull back the connector. This is how you do a plug, BMW. Don't forget, you clearly did. We have another connector coming off the block here. I despise these locking connectors. I don't think they're a good design. I don't think connectors are really just coming undone here on the regular. You need to come up with a locking. Someone's thesis was to reinvent the wheel. They chose an electrical plug instead. All right, at this point we have all of the wiring out of our way. We have our coolant lines out of our way. Now we can proceed with the removal of the oil filter housing. We have a couple bolts that we can access from here. We have one down here by the engine mount, and there's one right up top underneath this connector for the heat module. From there we have a couple on the other side, which we're gonna have to access from underneath the car. So let's zap these two out first, and then we'll work our way underneath, remove a couple more shields, and then get the other three out. We have our E10 socket on our electric ratchet, ready to rock and roll. Now with those two undone, let's head underneath, get some shielding off, and then access the rest of the E10 so we can pull that housing off. We have 18 8mm bolts to remove to get this back shield and this aluminum shield out of our way. We might take this one out for the side fender liner as well, make it 19 or 20. So we have better access to what we're doing here. We have an E8 that's holding this manifold bracket, which we're gonna zap out first. Then we'll pull this bracket out of the way. Set that to the side. All right, we're gonna zap this lower E10, and then we have two more up above. I'm using a small 3-inch extension with the E10 socket and my electric ratchet to get that out. We have two E10s up top left for the oil filter housing. These are at a bit of an angle, so they're gonna be a little bit tedious to get to, but really just wanna get your socket on them. With all 5 E10s undone, we're gonna hop back up top and pull the oil filter housing out, and then from there we can move on. Right now we're gonna do our best to pull this oil filter housing out. Again, be mindful if you have the cap off, there's still gonna be a little bit of oil in there. So just try not to get that all over the place. Shove a towel in it if you need to. We're gonna push back these coolant lines, which are holding us up a little bit. All right, so we're gonna do some cleanup. We're gonna remove that old gasket. We're gonna wipe down the surface as best as possible. And then we're gonna throw some tape over everything just to keep any dirt, debris, and other coolant flowing either into the oil channels by accident or just getting stuff contaminated in general. One thing we noticed, the oil filter housing is original to this car. However, since we talked about things being apart in here before, we knew that the manifold had been out, and the heat module that's currently in the car looks to be replaced. And actually one of the bolts is totally loose down below, which is just gonna cause a leak down the road. So whoever was in here before just simply didn't like tightening down E-Torx bolts, which is kind of funny. So nonetheless, we're gonna pull off this old gasket, wipe everything down as best as we can, and then again, just throw some tape over it in the meantime to keep stuff from falling into it. All right, with that nice and blocked off, you can see we have one more electrical connector here. There's a gray release locking tab, my favorite, on the opposite side. We'll release that, unlock it, pull that connector, and we have two more E10s up top, 3 on the bottom, and this heat module can come out. All right, let's get those 2 E10s up top. Let's go for an easy win, and then we'll get the ones on the bottom. We're back under the car. And mostly for filming purposes, you can easily tackle this hardware from above in the engine bay, but just so we can give you a better view. But again, using the new part as a guide, we have 3 more E10s down at the bottom, and then we'll go back up top, get that last one that's holding everything in place, and pull this baby out. So here's what's happening. We're starting to pull this out. This O-ring is just stuck into the block. Again, one of those beautiful O-ring and plastic fittings that go into the engine block or cylinder heads on these BMWs. That probably will be nice and flat. And well, this one's not going to be brown because it was replaced, but this is just keeping us stuck in there. So maybe a little bit of a pry bar or a screwdriver very gently around these areas where there's no sealing surfaces will help get this out. We're going to go in with our little pry bar tool here. Get this baby out of here. Just dripping this coolant down because I have a catch pan down there. No problem. All right, here is our lovely old heat module. We're going to set this to the side, reward ourselves for getting this far. We're going to block those two coolant ports a bit, get that old gasket off, and just clean up that whole area before we install our new module. All right, now we have our area cleaned up. Before we install the heat module back in, to give you the best view possible of our area, we're going to pull off our protective tape now that we're done blasting and cleaning stuff here. It's okay if a little bit of coolant comes out. That's no problem. Because we have a little bit of oil seepage on the tape, which is to be expected. What we're going to do now is prime the engine, essentially. This is per BMW. This is how they want you to prime these blocks after a oil filter housing repair, which of course has to come off for the heat module. So for the oil filter housing, we have a couple passages. We have 2 coolant passages and 2 oil passages. As the engine gets primed, if you will, oil is going to start to fill up and come from this first passage here. So our goal is to rotate the crank clockwise until we start to see oil come up in this channel here. Obviously, we don't want to pump it enough to where it's going to spill out, because then we're going to have to clean up again, wait for it to stop dripping, and then get our housing on. But we just want it to get into that void and just kind of hang out there. In order to do that, again, rotate the crank clockwise from the front. So let's do that now. And per BMW, all we need to do as far as the oiling. So obviously we drained the oil, so we're going to have to fill it with oil first. So let's do that now. And then we will turn the crank and see if we can get a little bit of oil up there. Let's kick it off with the 5-liter jug first of Liqui Moly Gold. Capacity for this engine is 5.75 liters, even with the job that we're doing today, but it's still a good idea to check the oil level after the fact. All right, with that, we'll give that a second. Then we're gonna grab our crank tool, this guy right here, and we're going to feed this into the front. Again, rotate clockwise until we start to see oil coming up on that channel. And technically that's what BMW calls for, or that is all they call for to prime this engine. Again, with that, let me get this funnel out of here. We'll get that capped back up and we'll get ready to rotate the crank, and we'll have you set up so that you can see the oil starting to come up at the same time. So it's going to be hard to see, but we have 4 crank bolts here. So that's what our tool is biting onto. You can see the 4 openings on the tool. So we're going to key that in, and then in a clockwise position, rotate it until we start seeing oil coming up over on the oil filter housing side of things. So you can see that crevice is filling up with oil, which is exactly what we want. That's more than enough. We don't need it to overflow and make a mess. But now that system is good to rock. Let's get this heat module in, and then we'll get the housing in. All right, we are ready to throw our new heat module in. There is a coolant line that you have to replace, even if you were just taking this apart for other reasons. And that's this hard line right here, which came out with our old heat module. We're gonna throw this one on after the oil filter housing goes in, just so we're not fighting it. When it's on the car, it's gonna sit like this, and that little bit of curvature, whatever things we don't have obstructing our way when that oil filter housing comes in and out, which is mainly this line here, is gonna make life a little bit easier. So that will stay off for now. We'll pop that in after the fact. We have some dielectric grease on our sealing O-ring for the back of the heat module. That's gonna help us slide it into the block without risking the chance of pinching, rolling, or cutting that O-ring. So let's get this baby fed in, and then we'll get our new E10 started by hand. We have plenty of room to get to that coolant line pipe after the fact too, so no problem. I'm still gonna test fit before we get the housing fully situated, the oil filter housing. If for some reason I see that's gonna be a problem, then we'll come back and have you put the pipe in first. 10 Newton meters for all 5. All right, with this in, let's get that coolant pipe in now. Don't worry about putting this in the wrong way. It really only goes in one way. It has 2 channels, one on the left, one on the right, that are both different sizes. So once those key into the heat module, if you have it right, it'll slip in all the way. And if you don't, you'll just have to flip it. A little bit of that electric grease on that inner O-ring is gonna go a long way into seating this. Let's get that oil filter housing in. All right, let's feed this housing in. Gonna kind of finagle it in a manner that the old one came out. Full disclosure, my concern from earlier with the pipe coming off the heat module is hanging us up a bit. So if you want to do that one totally after the fact, you can. It's not a big deal, but it is enough where the edge of the cooler is just getting stuck on that little plastic hook right there. But just give it a little bit of a wiggle. Again, be gentle with it. These are all new parts, so they're not going to be brittle, and you'll get it situated. Well, probably the biggest offender being this coolant line down here. Let's get this baby lined up. And let's get some of these E10 started by hand. All right, we have those just finger tightened. Now let's head underneath the car and get those other 3 finger tightened, and then we can torque them down. Again, these 5 E10s will also be 10 Newton meters. All right, first I'm just gonna go in by hand and try to get these all kind of started, and then we'll go in with our socket and get those situated. We have all 3 snugged up. Now let's hit these with 10 Newton meters if possible with the torque wrench. If not, we'll just snug them up gently by hand. We have the 3 E10s down on the bottom side all torqued up. Now with that, let's head back up top in the engine bay. We'll get the other 2, and then we can start hooking up all the electrical, the coolant lines, and get that intake manifold back on. I'm just gonna draw these in a little bit more, super gently with the electric ratchet, and then we can torque them up. All right, we have our oil filter housing fully bolted up. Let's get some wiring situated back up. We have a couple alligator clips that go to the oil filter housing for the alternator wiring, and we'll just work our way around. We're gonna hook up our coolant line back here. That goes to the heat module. Again, a little bit of the electric grease on that O-ring on the coolant line makes clipping these in a breeze. Following these 2 cables in front of the oil filter housing, we have our AC compressor switch, and our positive for the alternator just bites onto the housing like so, and that can go back on here. It's just a 13mm nut. And since we have all the room in the world to work with, we are going to torque this down properly. 19 Newton meters for that 13. AC pressure switch, or signal switch, can go in. Gray locking tab, and that one bites here on the front side of the oil filter housing, like so. Let's swing this spaghetti mess over. All right, heat module. And we have this lovely pseudo high pressure fuel pump looking connector. This one really put up a fight. And we have the negative for the alternator. All right, we have about 2 more coolant lines we can hook up now. We have the upper radiator hose, and we have the one that's been kinked over the alternator. We'll plug those 2 babies in, and then we'll hop on the underside. We'll get the support bracket for the intake manifold on, as well as the skid plates on the bottom. We're gonna clip this baby back on. That's gonna go like that. This radiator hose that we tucked over the alternator can go back into its home. Beautiful. All right, and now we have our upper radiator hose. That's gonna go from here to the upper connector on our radiator. So let's get that fed back in. All right, at this point we have our coolant lines hooked up. We have The oil filter housing all hooked up. All the electrical is plumbed back in, like how I got that backwards. We have our expansion tank line, which comes off the top of the cylinder head to the high temp circuit. We're going to plug it into the head. I'm going to keep it off of the expansion tank for the time being because I'm going to be replacing this. But let's get that one fed in, and then I'm also going to open up the housing, just see what's in there. Probably nothing, or a filter, hopefully. But we'll look at that. We'll make sure that filter is good to go, and then that'll be buttoned up so that after we come back from underneath with the manifold support bracket and the plastic shielding all taken care of, we are pretty much ready to just drop the manifold back in. So expansion tank line, let's check that oil filter, and then we'll go from there. Okay, all right. This is gonna hook up to that bracket under the manifold later on. All right. Now let's get that oil filter off. All right, we have a new filter in here. This is a genuine BMW filter, AKA a Mala filter, which is what is in our oil kit. So that's great. We're gonna throw this back on. We'll torque it up to 25 Newton meters, but at least it's nice to know we have a fresh filter in the new housing with a good filter in it. So let me button this back up and then we'll go from there. Filters going back in. As a reminder, if you've seen the oil change DIY, this little dowel on the filter does key into the filter housing, so make sure you line those up. That's gonna be towards the firewall when you seat that back in. We're gonna snug this baby up to 25 Newton meters. That's good to rock. Let's head underneath. Let's get that support in. Let's get those shields buttoned up. And we're one step closer to an intake manifold. We're gonna get this E8 snugged up and just keep this bracket lined up as best as possible. We can always move it around a little bit once we're back up top. All right, everything is buttoned up underneath here that we need. One final look, everything looks great. We're going to get our skid plates back on, and then we will move up top again. We've done a check like 3 or 4 times to make sure we didn't forget a plug or a coolant line underneath what's going to be underneath the manifold. So now it's time for the manifold. We're going to renew the intake manifold gaskets. Take a shot for every time I say manifold. I'm going to pull these old gaskets off the manifold, and we'll give this surface a quick little wipe down with some brake clean. All right, that looks pretty good. You take a really good look in there. You can see the intercooler that lives inside of the housing. Pretty interesting, pretty cool, pretty tech. All right, there's little openings on the top side of the manifold. Those are gonna just help you align your manifold gaskets. They have a little locating dowel on them so that they only go in one way. That's ready to rock. Let's get the paper towel out of our ports, and then we'll feed this baby over. We have a 6-inch extension with a 10 mil socket. Our goal is just to get these 10 mil bolts started by hand. All right, so the torquing sequence for these are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, all to 10 Newton meters. First, I'm going to snug them up using the 1/4-inch ratchet. I'm just going to continue doing that all the way across until they all start getting a little bit snug. Just doing about a full turn at a time. It's going to be an E10 bolt. We're just going to snug that up. Torque spec for that is 8 Newton meters if you want to put a torque wrench on it. We're just going to give it a quick little zap and it'll be good to go. All right, with the manifold all bolted up, we're going to hook up our coolant line down below. And then from there, we'll get the clip situated so that we can get the 3 coolant lines tied up. And then we're going to start installing our PDM and DME box. Then we'll get the PDM in and the ECM or DME, and then we'll hook everything up from there. We'll start swinging over some hardware along with the coolant line for the top side of the cooler. So I'm going to pull out my stopper plug. Even after I drained it, there's still coolant coming out of it. So we're gonna try to do this as quickly as possible so we don't get coolant all over the stuff we just cleaned up. Let's get this clip situated and get these coolant lines locked in. All right, we're gonna feed our clip in. Let's get this expansion tank line fed back in first. And we have our upper radiator hose. This one we're gonna move because we just replaced it. So I got the routing backwards, so that's gonna be in the middle. And then the lower coolant line is gonna clip in right underneath it. It's got these two white lines as a guide to help you kind of know where that's gonna go. Bam. All right, with that, we're gonna get this wiring just kind of tucked back, if you will, as best as possible so that we can get our box in place, and then we'll start hooking things up. All right, we're gonna feed in our PDM/DME box retainer back in. This little bottom tab here keys in to that little opening here next to the AC line. So just make sure you get that lined up, get that baby keyed in there. Let's get these two 10 mil started. Then we're just gonna snug these up by the weak little electric ratchet I have here. This little line, this little bracket for our wiring harness can key back into the back of this plastic here. Let's get this fuel line out of our way so it's not fighting us. There we go. It's ready to rock there. Let's drop in our PDM and DME. And that way, once we start swinging wiring harnesses back over and that main coolant line and all that good stuff, we kind of have a home for all that stuff to go. Let's go ahead and take care of this coolant line now. All right, at this point, we can just start plugging everything back into the PDM and the DME, and then we'll worry about tidying up the rest of the stuff on top of the intake manifold. So let's work on that next. Clip this back into the top of the manifold here. Pretty straightforward. PDM wiring is pretty straightforward. If you take a look at the plugs here, you'll notice they're all keyed. They're all keyed differently, meaning it's going to be impossible to mess up the connections. Granted, you saw whoever was in here before labeled them probably before removing everything. So not necessary. You can save that time there again, but feel free to just take a look and see what those look like before you start plugging everything in. Same thing applies for the DME. Now, before we swing over that last bit of harness, which is going to ride over the vent valve and all that, let's swing that vent valve back over. We'll feed it onto the intake manifold, and then we'll go from there. Before that vent valve goes in, we can plug in this plug on top of the intake manifold back in so that we're not fighting the vent valve later. There we go. That's going to live there. So let's continue plugging these in over here. All right, we have another connector here that's going to clip into this housing. We got to clip back into this housing over here as well. Let's do that one first. It's a little bit tedious to see here, but we're under the fuel line and evap line, and we're just keying these clips back in so that stuff isn't floating around. We have an alligator clip that wants to live there. And here, we'll do that one after we get this plug back in. It's like a beautiful mind in here, you know? I know where this goes. I know where this goes. Let's slide that baby in first. You know, BMW just really knows how to push your buttons. There we go. All right, alligator clips, alligator clips. Okay. Like we were never here. That is the goal, right? That's how you want to make these things look. That is all good. That is all good. If something doesn't work, we will know exactly where to come look. Let's get this cover back on and forget about this mess of stuff, huh? That sounds good to me. Let's get this evap line situated and go from there. Evap can just go back over its rubber grommet, like so. I'm gonna have to pull the grommet up so it lives with that. Don't forget to pop the evap line back into the holder above the fuel line. Just a little clip like that. Electrical connector. This can get reclipped to the top of the intake manifold, like so. That looks good there. There's an alligator clip here for the valve cover. I'm just gonna pop that baby back on. This can just hang out here for now. Don't forget about your insulation back here. Again, ours was in bad shape. It was all the way back where it doesn't belong. It should be up there like that. All right, from here we have our other evap line, which is gonna go down to the inlet side of things. We also have our throttle body and supporting bracket that we can throw back in next. So let's work on that. The throttle body gaskets are the exact same part number for the interior and exterior gasket. So if you're gonna be swapping them out, just get 2 of them. This gasket is totally reusable, but it is totally an opportunity to create a leak also in the system, which is why we are replacing it. I'm gonna throw a new one in. This will be for the interior side up against the throttle body. And similar to the intake manifold gaskets, they just go on. Pretty straightforward. They just go into their channel and they're good to rock. I'm gonna take our electrical connector and plug that back in while we have it nice and loose. Lock that in. And this baby is going to key in to the intake manifold like so. And then let's get these 10mm bolts started. So that holds it in place. All right, we're gonna hit them with the torque wrench just to be sure. It's gonna be 8 Newton meters. Let's get our supporting bracket back in. You can make sure that the throttle body connector, or harness I should say, goes around our bracket like we covered earlier when we were taking it apart. We have our throttle body cable. That's gonna go through the little clamp up front. I'm not closing these clamps yet, I'm just feeding them kind of where they're gonna wanna be. All right, let's get these 2 E8s situated and the top torques off the throttle body so that we can kind of get things aligned a little bit better. No more than 8 Newton meters if you're going to torque those babies. And then let's get these clamps all locked up. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of cleanup. And now at this point, we can continue on with securing our auxiliary water pump down below. We'll get our charge pipe back in, and then we'll continue on with the air inlet and all that good stuff. We're gonna get our 4 expanding rivets started. Get those babies lined up. There's 1. 2 is gonna be behind these lines. Just why we keep the auxiliary pump out and out of the way. 3 is gonna be in the lower left corner. So there's the rivet there, then we're gonna push it in. And then 4 down below our lower auxiliary pump. A little bit tight to see, but you can just get in there. All right. With that baby in, let's get our auxiliary pump bolted back up to the bracket, and then we'll clip in the lines and the electrical connector for it. Just taking off the 10mm that I situated on here before. We're gonna get this baby on, back over its stud, get that 10mm nut back on. And let's snug up that 10mm with the electric ratchet once more. Both of these coolant lines can get plugged back into the pump. There's 2. We have our auxiliary pump electrical connector. which we had swung up over here. That's going to come back down and plug in to the bottom of our pump right up front there. All right. Alligator clip off the pump bracket right here. This line runs off the front here on this little clamp. And then this guy was also clipped to the acoustic cover right in front of this lower coolant line. So pretty straightforward, just keeping everything nice and tidy. Oh, you know what? This is gonna have to run behind the two coolant lines. So I'll pop those off really quick and we'll feed the line behind it. And then we can hook those coolant lines back up. No big deal, it'll take 2 seconds, but that's why taking photos and that kind of stuff when you take things apart will go a long way. While we're here, we can also plug in the auxiliary pump. All right, we're gonna get our charge pipe back in, get that fit in here underneath the turbo. There we go. Hear that little click. And means we're locked in. Give it a little bit of a twist. Helps heat that O-ring. We're gonna lock this baby up over here. This is gonna key in to the throttle body so that it sits in proper, and then we'll get the 3 T30s started. I'm just gonna use the 1/4 inch ratchet to give them a gentle snug. Torque spec for these T30s are 8 Newton meters, not a whole lot. So we're just gonna give them a little cinch. I'm taking this car right back apart after this video, but 8 Newton meters if you wanna put a torque wrench on it. We have an electrical connector here and an electrical connector here that we need to plug back in. This one can go in right here. You'll see that most of these wires kind of rest in their natural spot of where they want to be. Let me get this one right here. Alligator clip. All right, let's continue on with the next few bits. All right, we're gonna feed in the silencer portion of our box. This goes right into the turbo inlet. Before we click that baby all the way in, I'm gonna get that evap line situated onto here first. Beautiful. So plug this baby in. Let's route this underneath these other two. Okay, beautiful. Now we can click this all the way into the turbo. Give it a couple pulls, make sure it's not gonna come out. We'll hook up that other evap line up top in a little bit. All right, let's take care of our diverter valve. That one's gonna run through the front here of this evap line. Click that baby in. That's gonna bite down on this air box right there. This can plug back into the valve cover, like so. All right, that's locked in down there. We have one more evap line that runs from the vent valve, or it's a 2-piece vent valve and the intake manifold down to the inlet feed by the turbo, so we can clip those babies in next. Here is our old one that we pulled off, and you know, the top one is in pretty good shape, the one with the sensor on it still, but we do carry all of them individually. So we bought both of them, and I'm gonna join them here. That one's good to rock, and then we'll hook them up. Let's hook them up over here to the turbo side of things first. We have our electrical connector right here. All right, that baby's all situated. Now let's get the other part of our air box in. It's easier to feed these grommets back into the strut tower than to try to install it with the air box. So if they came up with you, just take them off. All right, this baby is nice and situated. Let's get it plugged back in. That's gonna be this connector right here. Lock that baby in. Alligator clip right here. Boom. All right, let's head underneath. Let's button up those shields, and then we'll come back up top and get the battery situated in the trunk, and then we can move on to filling and bleeding the coolant system. All right, we had ended up taking out this corner shield just to give you a better view of the low temp circuit coolant line that we drained from, to drain the cooler from. So we're gonna throw that one back on first, a couple 8 mils, then we'll move on to the middle piece and then the rear half, and we'll be one step closer to being done. All right, let's switch over to the torque wrench. And these 18 mils get torqued to 56 Newton meters. All right, now let's get the last bit of plastic shielding in, and we'll head back up top. All right, they're all started. I'm just gonna snug them up real quick, and then I'll meet you in the trunk. We'll get the battery hooked back up, and then we'll fill this baby up. All right, it has come time to fill our cooling system. We're gonna be filling the low temp and high temp circuit. Total capacity for the two systems combined is just about 14 liters, 9.8 for the high temp, 4.1 for the low temp. Again, that's assuming that they are fully empty. We didn't crack the block anywhere, so there's probably gonna be a little bit of coolant there. So we have enough coolant if we were doing these from a completely dry fill. We have 2 gallons of HT12 concentrate and 2 gallons of distilled water mixed together. We're gonna fill these both up, and then from there we'll talk about how to run the bleeding procedure. They're pretty similar for the low temp and high temp circuit, with the exception of the high temp requiring the engine to be ran. So we'll kind of go over that. We'll start with the low temp, see if both systems are being bled with the electronic pumps, and if not, we'll still cover the high temp circuit per BMW. So first things first, we have our U-View tool ready to rock and roll. We'll start with the high temp circuit, fill that up, and then we'll move to the low temp, and then we'll talk again about the bleeding and go a little bit more in depth. All right, we have our air hooked up. We're gonna get that valve closed, and we're gonna pull vacuum. I like to use a towel around the breather valve here. Sometimes it can mist out whatever's in the system, and you don't wanna get coolant all over the place if you don't have to. And we're gonna try to hit about 25 on our gauge. Once we pull vacuum to about 25, we're gonna let it sit for a minute or two, just to make sure we have no leaks. It's totally normal to see the coolant lines starting to collapse on themselves, which is exactly what you wanna see. What you don't wanna see is that needle dropping after you have stopped. That means you have a leak somewhere. So let's hope to avoid that. All right, we can see the upper radiator hose is totally collapsed under that AC line. Just peeking underneath the air box, I can see the lower one is totally folded in on itself too. That's exactly what we want to see. Our gauge is staying perfect. It has not dropped the hair, which also means that not only is our cooling system not leaking, but our tool isn't leaking too. That can be a big problem if the tool is bad that you're using. I'll let that sit for a minute, and then our next job is going to be to ensure that this feed line always remains at the bottom of your coolant bucket. If at any point air goes in there, it's going to totally kill the process. It's going to allow air into the system. You'll have to drain and do this again. So let's try to avoid that. So yeah, I'll see you in a minute, and then we'll go from there. All right, what I'm going to do first might be a little bit overkill, but it's something I like to practice here. I'm going to keep my line submerged. I'm just going to fill the bleed tool, or prime it first. So I'm going to open that, let the coolant hit the valve, close it right away. We'll pull vacuum for another 5 seconds, and then we'll open it in full. So now the system's primed. Let's pull vacuum for another minute. All right, now we're gonna open that valve, keeping this line fully submerged, and we'll stop once it stops pulling coolant. All right, at this point, our tool is done feeding our high temp circuit. You can also start to see some air here in the line, which is totally fine. We're gonna lift this up and move over to our low temp tank. We have 1.75 gallons, so just under 2 gallons of coolant left, which means this took just over 2. We have again a total capacity of 4.1 liters for the low temp circuit, so just over a gallon. So we have more than enough coolant here to take care of that. All right, same thing. We're going to pull vacuum on this. We'll prime the line and then we'll let it fill. Now it's been sitting, gauge is good. Let's prime this line once more. All right, now I'm gonna open up the valve, keep the line at the bottom, and just make sure we don't run out of coolant in our bucket. All right, at this point, the low temp has stopped taking in coolant. We're gonna remove our air, line off with the tool. We're gonna close the valve, open this up gently, and then we'll open up the valve and let the coolant back into our bucket. This we'll throw back into our BMW containers. We'll write on them that they're mixed, so we know they're good for topping off or filling this car up. Once we get all cleaned up, then let's pick it up with the bleeding procedure. We'll cover both of the procedures for the high temp and the low temp circuit, and then we'll start with the low temp circuit. All right, for the high temp and low temp circuits, you want the expansion tanks at the min level. There's a yellow circle inside that shows your max. It's a two-step bit. The top is your max, the bottom is your low. You're gonna wanna set both of them to low before you run the bleeding procedure. We have the low temp circuit set already. I just pulled some coolant out of the high temp circuit. We're gonna put the lids on. I'm not gonna close them fully just yet, because while we run the low temp circuit bleeding, I wanna see if anything's actually happening to the high temp circuit. Regardless, we're gonna run the high temp bleeding procedure right after the low temp one. So with that, let's hop in the car and let's get this thing going. All right, so let's talk about the bleeding procedure really quick and how the low temp and high temp circuits differ a little bit. Again, this is all per BMW. The goal here is that we're gonna be putting the car in a service mode basically. So using the start stop engine button, we're gonna hit that 3 times quickly with our foot off the pedals. And then from there, the key to keeping the car awake long enough to run the bleeding procedure, which is about 11 minutes, we're gonna have to turn on the low beams and the hazards at the same time. That'll keep the ignition from turning off and cutting the bleeding procedure short. It helps to have a battery tender on your battery, especially if your battery is a little bit older during this whole process, as 11 minutes is a bit of time and you do have lights and hazard lights running at the same time. Once the hazard lights and the low beam lights are on, we're gonna make sure that the car is not in Eco Pro mode. We're gonna turn our temp setting on the heater controls here to the highest, with the fan setting to the lowest. Once we have those things taken care of, we're gonna hold our foot on the accelerator pedal for about 10 seconds. And then from there, we should audibly be able to hear the auxiliary pumps engage. At that point, the service is just gonna run for about 11 minutes, again, which is why we recommend you put a tender on that battery. Once that's done, then we can go back into the expansion tank, check the level, and set the low temp cooling circuit to the full line. Now, where things get a little bit different for the high temp circuit, I have a feeling that both water pumps are gonna actuate for both circuits. However, per BMW, to properly bleed the high temp circuit, we're gonna do all of the mentioned previously. We're gonna set low beams on, hazard lights on, temp to the highest, fan speed to the lowest, foot on the accelerator pedal for about 10 seconds. And then from there, we're gonna start the car. We should see a service function on the dash that's saying in service mode, and it's gonna run the car and control the RPMs for the next 11 minutes, keeping it at about 3,500 RPM. So it's important that the car is in park, on the ground, tanks are sealed up, hood is closed, as if you were gonna drive almost, and then just let the car do its thing for about 11 minutes. From there, you're gonna wanna let the car fully cool down, or at least below 50 degrees Celsius, so that you can open the cap safely and check the coolant level there. So again, a little bit different. Once we get the low temp circuit bleeding, we're gonna hop over to the front and just take a look and see if we can see the coolant flowing through the low temp circuit expansion tank, and then see if we see anything on the high temp side as well. I have a feeling both are gonna run, but again, high temp requires the engine running. So let's start with the low temp cooling circuit first. And for that, we're gonna start stop engine 3 times quickly. We're gonna turn on low beams. We're gonna turn on our hazards. We're gonna set our temp to the highest. We're gonna turn that off. We don't need that. That's fine. We're just gonna point through the center vents. I'm gonna turn our blower speed down as much as possible. All right. I'm gonna make sure that the car is not in Eco Pro mode. I don't believe it is. Now we're gonna hold the throttle pedal for about 10 seconds. On the dash, we have service function started. And now we let the car sit for about 11 minutes. Again, tender's on. Let's hop up front and let's take a look and see if we can see the coolant flowing through that low temp circuit tank and maybe something out of the high temp circuit. For the high temp circuit, we're gonna do exactly the same once this procedure finishes for the low temp, except after we do the throttle pedal for 10 seconds, then we're gonna start the car. So I'll see you in a little bit again when we go to do that. We don't have anything happening just yet, but we did hear the auxiliary pumps actuate a second ago. Here we go. You can see coolant flowing on the low temp side. Do we have anything over here? Nothing on the high temp. It's not a bad idea to keep an eye on this. If you need to top it off a little bit to keep it at that low level, you can. As long as there's coolant in the tank and something for there to flow, you're gonna be fine. All right, so with that, we're gonna let the 11 minutes lapse and then we'll pick it back up and do this again, but for the high temp circuit. And again, just to reiterate, nothing is happening with the high temp system right now. There's no coolant flowing, which means we are gonna have to follow the separate procedure for the high temp, which requires starting the engine. So I'll see you in about 11 minutes, or a second for you, I suppose. I don't know, grab a snack or something if you want.
11 minutes later.
At this point, our 11 minutes are up. The low temp circuit is looking great. I need a splash of coolant and that's gonna hit the max mark. Once I get that done, we're gonna throw the cap on that. We're gonna throw the cap on the high temp circuit. Just taking one last look at where the level is right now. Put the cap on it, and then we're gonna initiate the same procedure again, plus starting the car, letting it run for 11 minutes. The car is gonna do its own thing from there. And then once that's done, we'll turn the car off, let it fully cool down, and we'll top off the coolant level as needed. All right, now we're gonna do the high temp circuit bleed. Hood is closed, car is on the ground. We're in park, all four wheels are touching the ground again. We're gonna do the same thing, start, stop engine 3 times, hazards, low beams, temp on high, fan on low, accelerator pedal for 10 seconds. Then we're gonna start the car and we should see a service function started on the dash, at which point the car is gonna control the RPMs and go from there. High, fan on low. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. One more for insurance. Start the car. Service function started. That's exactly what we want to see. From here, we're going to let the car run for 11 minutes. That's the length of the bleeding procedure. The car is going to control the RPMs. They're going to drive up as high as 3,500 RPM and so on and so forth. When the service is done, it's going to drop down back to idle. And it's worth mentioning that because the car is running, you don't really need the tender at that point. The car is going to be charging. However, we're going to leave everything else as it is. The hazards on, the low beams on, the door open, and just let the car do its thing. Catch you in 11 minutes. All right, with the car all buttoned up, we have our low temp and high temp circuits bled. We have done a lot of work today. None of it was very actually hard. If I had to do this again with 2 hands, I think it'd be a lot easier. But overall, it seems invasive, but you can totally do this at home. A lift is not necessary, but getting the car up a little bit off the ground is gonna go a long way, especially for those bottom oil filter housing bolts. Again, do not skip the step of priming the engine. Make sure that you have that tool for the crank. And otherwise, if you like this video or you learned a thing or two today, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments you may have in the comment section below. And if you'd like to see more DIYs like this or see the other 5 in the series, please consider subscribing. We're making new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.